Before hitting the fall, 2010 had already seen both triumphant releases and studio scandals. But even with the year's proof that titles can release successfully outside the holiday season, the run-up to Christmas is still the coveted spot reserved only for gaming's biggest titles. The ending days of 2010 somehow managed to fit even more controversy into an already outrageous year. And worse, some of the year's most touted titles ended in flaming disaster. But even for all that, the year still managed to close out on a high note, with franchises resurrected from the grave and some of the biggest titles to ever hit the gaming world. September started off with a surprise, a product for the iOS from no less than Epic Games. Part game, part tech demo, Epic Citadel was primarily meant for the company to show off how their popular Unreal Engine 3 could run on mobile hardware. Combined with id's Rage game for the iOS and Chair Entertainment's Infinity Blade running on Unreal, and the next year may break mobile's reputation as a casual-only gaming space. That weekend, the PAX Gaming Convention got underway in Seattle, and dropped a bombshell. Duke Nukem Forever had blown his way back from utter annihilation. After developer 3D Realms had let go its entire team due to budget problems, Gearbox Software stepped in and took over the project. The reaction was so strong that not long afterwards, Gearbox announced that they had purchased the rights to the entire Duke brand. But PAX brought with it a real-world tragedy. On September 3rd, Company of Heroes lead designer Brian Wood was driving with his pregnant wife. A high driver then ran a red light and struck the car. At the last second, Wood swerved the car, saving his wife and baby and 2 passengers in the other car, but taking the full impact himself in the process. He died instantly. Afterwards, a grassroots memorial fund for his widow started by gamers netted both massive donations and widespread media attention, hopefully proving once and for all playing violent video games doesn't make us terrible people. On September 10th, developer Turbine made good on its summer promise and made their MMO The Lord of the Rings Online free to play from start to finish. Players can now download the entire game free, travel across Middle-earth free, and level their character all the way to the max free. Of course, they'd have to pay for the best items and extra quests and abilities, but all in all, that's a pretty good deal. On September 14th, developer Bungie gave the world a fond farewell to the franchise that had defined them for a decade. Halo Reach released to stellar reviews and blockbuster sales, and is widely considered the best Halo game ever made. With it, Bungie has now concluded the journey they began at the birth of the Xbox, though Microsoft has promised that more Halo is on the way from their own 343 Industries. GG, guys. But while Halo was booming, APB was going bust. After only 2.5 months on the market, developer Real Time Worlds announced that their ambitious MMO was closing its doors forever. The game just never caught on. Without a substantial subscriber base, they couldn't afford it anymore. Meanwhile, Sony debuted its big entry into the motion control space, the Sony Move. You move it. By December, the Move had shipped 4.1 million units to stores, and with hardcore games like Killzone 3 promising to support it, it might just continue to grow. Still, against the entrenched Nintendo Wii and the more daring Xbox Kinect, it's got its work cut out for it. On the 21st, the ever-popular Civilization series received its 5th entry. Adding in some new features while sticking to the tried-and-true formula, Civilization turned into one of the year's biggest PC hits. On October 5th, a new Castlevania game released onto consoles, Lords of Shadow. Castlevania games in 3D have traditionally been poorly received, but Konami took a big gamble with a third-party Spanish developer, Mercury Steam. And it paid off. Castlevania was widely hailed as the series' first successful foray into the 3D space, and a surprise bright point in the holiday season. Mercury Steam is already at work on a sequel. On the other end of the spectrum, the massively hyped Medal of Honor from Electronic Arts found itself saddled with controversy before it was even released. The US military decided to pull the game from any stores on American bases, since the game's multiplayer allowed you to play as the Taliban against US forces. Even a last-minute name change from Taliban to Op4 didn't prevent the ban, or the negative coverage the title got from the media. Then the game actually released on the 12th to tepid reviews and a mostly disappointed fanbase. Medal of Honor had been promoted as a major competitor to Activision's Call of Duty series, but didn't even come close. It sold 1.5 million copies on its first week, which is actually quite good. But compared to Call of Duty, or even Battlefield, it is quite lacking. The month concluded with a slew of sequels, including Fallout New Vegas from developer Obsidian, Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 from LucasArts, and Fable 3 from Lionhead. All three sold relatively well, though weren't the breakout hits that others in their respective franchises had been. On the 29th, Mega Man creator Keiji Inafune announced that he was leaving Capcom after 23 years. The announcement followed his earlier statements critical of the Japanese gaming industry as a whole and his frustration with trying to compete with Western titles. His next steps are unknown, but with Inafune gone, Capcom now has lost most of the top talent that defined them for the last decade. Despite Japan's struggle against the rising tide of Western development, one company has always stood head and shoulders above the rest: Nintendo. And yet, even the juggernaut announced that they had taken a 52% drop in earnings in the first half of the year versus the same period last year. This was largely due to a massive drop in Wii sales, begging the question, has the console finally hit the saturation point? Nintendo still has a firm lead against Microsoft and Sony, but as their consoles are still selling well, Nintendo must be a little worried. Meanwhile, Nintendo did what it did best and released a Kirby game. Another one. At the beginning of November, video games went up against the toughest boss of them all, the United States Supreme Court. The state of California was arguing the constitutionality of their law banning the sale of violent video games to children, with the industry arguing that this was a violation of free speech and a form of censorship. To date, the case is still ongoing, though at the moment, the court appears to be leaning on the side of free speech. On the 4th, Microsoft finally released their motion control unit, the Kinect, amidst an all-out advertising assault. Allowing players to control their games with nothing but their own bodies, the Kinect is truly an engineering marvel. The device sold 2.5 million units in its first 25 days, making it an unqualified commercial success as well. Whether or not hardcore gamers will adopt the casual-oriented device remains to be seen, but either way, the Big M is smiling wide from its Redmond throne. On the 9th, Activision released the latest Call of Duty game, Black Ops, from developer Treyarch. Despite the earlier fiasco with franchise founders Infinity Ward, the series' good reputation was unstoppable. The new game sold 5.6 million units in one day, smashing the unbelievable record that Modern Warfare 2 had set up the year before. For now at least, the loss of Infinity Ward has not impacted the franchise. Where it goes from here is less of a sure thing. On the 16th, Ubisoft brought their popular Assassin's Creed franchise into the multiplayer arena with Brotherhood. Featuring a sprawling single-player campaign as well, the game garnered great reviews and has sold faster than its predecessors. Expect to see a lot more assassination coming from Ubisoft soon. On the same day, publisher Gamers First announced that they had bought APB and were bringing it back from the dead. They have promised to retool the troubled game and re-release it as a free-to-play MMO. Well, it can't do any worse than last time, right? On the 24th, something happened that absolutely defied belief. Gran Turismo 5, actually, for real, came out. First announced at E3 2005, the car sim had become something of a running joke for never releasing. But when it finally did, most reviewers gave it flack for being unpolished and feeling unfinished. Maybe they should have spent some more time on it. Meanwhile, Nintendo did what it did best and released a Donkey Kong game. Another one. Then on the 30th, a leak hit the internet claiming to be about Blizzard Entertainment. A chart showed the company's release plans for the next 5 years and mentioned some products no one had ever heard of. Rumors fly around all the time, and Blizzard has refused to comment on it. But a short while later, they fired the general manager of their China division. This is widely viewed as a reaction to the leak and confirmation that it is legitimate. If so, then this is one of the worst in gaming history, since sensitive financial information was leaked as well. Still, that didn't prevent Blizzard from releasing their latest World of Warcraft expansion, Cataclysm, on December 7th. Their biggest expansion to date, Cataclysm has completely changed the landscape of WoW forever, allowing for new quests and level designs on a 6-year-old game. To close out the year, video games got some recognition from old school media. Christopher Tin composed the theme song for Civilization IV in 2005. So in 2010, the Grammys nominated it for Best Instrumental Arrangement Accompanying Vocalists. The reason for the delay is that Tin's debut album released this year with the theme song Baba Yetu on it. On the whole, this has been a massive year for the industry, with more than its fair share of shakeups and resignations. But at the same time, records were shattered and icons long dead were brought back to life. But perhaps the biggest story was this. According to some sales figures, 2010 was the year in which digital sales overtook retail sales on the PC. The market shift from boxed products to digital ones has never been more clear, and in many ways it will define the years to come. Major publishers are promising fewer games, but with more DLC. And the Move and Kinect will only move them more into the casual space. But with id and Epic bringing hardcore into the casual realm, maybe the change won't be as bad as gamers have feared. The only way to find out is to keep on playing.